So I've heard recently from quite a few people that they don't believe in unconditional love. Like, horseshit, bullshit, there's no such thing as unconditional love. And I get it. Like, I 100% get where that come from is I think we're confused in believing that unconditional love is actually, first of all, the foundation. Unconditional love is not the beginning. Okay? And I'll explain to you what I mean by that in my personal thoughts, right? Like, this is nothing scientific. I also believe that unconditional love, once it gets past the first level, that it is also not for everybody in your life. And the reason being is because they don't pass the first level. So what's the first level? There is no reason why unconditional love can be practiced or entertained or given or received, in my personal opinion, if the foundation of a human being is not established. Meaning, do you have morals? Do you have values? You know, and are they in alignment with the standards of goodness? The standards, some people say God standards, you know, it just depends on what it is that you believe in. And I don't personally like to speak from a space of saying that you must believe in a certain anything or be a certain religion. But the reality is that everybody knows what it looks and feels like to be a good person. Everybody knows what it means to have good values, to have good morals. Everybody knows. You know, that's why integrity is such a freaking powerful word and a powerful characteristic. Because integrity with yourself is it. That's the foundation. That means you have morals and values when nobody's watching, right? So if you are a person of that caliber, then you will then know how to give unconditional love and know how to receive unconditional love. And don't expect someone to give you unconditional love if you haven't passed the first level of standards. You know? Why would I or you extend unconditional love to somebody else that is dishonest? No. Unconditional love is not for everybody, but does it exist is the question. Yes. It does exist and it can exist. But first the world's got to pass the first standard. And that is why it is almost extinct in our world today, because there's not very many relationships where people haven't cheated, you know, or haven't been dishonest. And sometimes the dishonesty doesn't just mean cheating, y'all. The world is not corrupt with a bunch of cheaters. Like, no, there are some good people out there that at least have that down, right? But sometimes we're dishonest because we're not ready to communicate our own insecurity. We're not ready to communicate our own fears. So we lie in the sense of a white lie because we can't sit with ourselves in what we're feeling and what we're thinking. So of course we got to lie to others because we're already lying to ourselves. Sometimes we lie so much to ourselves that we start telling this story that's fiction, but we've gotten to the point of believing that version of our story because we repeated it to ourselves so many times that we can't even come out of our own story. By the way, I can only speak to this shit, y'all, because I've lived it. So what do I mean when I say unconditional love? Okay, so first of all, no judgment. Okay? That first starts with yourself. If you're judging yourself for not being good enough, if you're judging yourself for not being pretty enough, if you're judging yourself for judging yourself, that's a real thing, then of course you can't love another person without judging them, right? But here's the deal. We can't judging, like we can't, if we pass the foundations of having morals and values and integrity with ourselves and with each other, right? In a relationship, this can be a romantic relationship, or this can be a family, a family member or a close friend. So it can be anything. Unconditional love. We say often, like, the best unconditional love that's felt is from our pets, our dog. I know I felt that from my dog. And it's because my dog didn't have any judgment, didn't have any expectation, didn't have any jealousy. Well, she did get a little jealous when people tried to get close to me, but, she was never going to quit on me. And she really had no fear when it came to me and her, right? So a lot of times we say there's unconditional love from our pets, right? And so the foundation of unconditional love to me, once you pass the standard of being a good person in your own right, as a whole, as one, right? Then the pieces of unconditional love from my brain, from the mind of me, right, is that there's no judgment, there's no expectation, there's no jealousy, there's no quitting, and there's no fear. That stuff can't exist. Not in a relationship in which you would like to call or find, give or receive unconditional love. So no judgment. Like, I can't judge you for your past. I can't judge you for the wounds that you have from your past. I can't judge you for the triggers that you have that scrape open those wounds from your past. I can't judge you for your weaknesses. If you are a person that has passed the standard of having the morals and values and integrity with yourself, to love yourself, to be honest with yourself, to heal yourself, to grow yourself, to want to progress, to be vulnerable, to be open, to be honest about where you are today with yourself, then you can be like that with your partner, your friend, your family member. So if you can then be vulnerable with them in that right, then they cannot judge you for your past or your wounds or your weaknesses, because you're so aware of them already that you've communicated them. And so it calls for unconditional love to support you in the healing process. Not to heal you, but to support you in the healing process. And I can't judge you for your efforts. If they're strong efforts, if they're weak efforts, if they're wrong efforts or right efforts defined by me, because I know your foundation. And if you've openly expressed and been vulnerable with me, then to love you unconditionally because you have the morals and the values and the integrity, then it's to love you with no judgment. Because I'm already aware of your conditions. You see, we try to ask for unconditional love, but we don't want to share all our conditions. So if you can be open to share all your conditions, then you open space to be unconditionally loved. Or even have the perspective that you are being unconditionally loved. I can't have expectation. Now hold up. Let's talk about this one for a second, okay? So, expectations. So, we got to communicate. We got to communicate our needs. We got to communicate our wants. Oh, this is getting crazy. You guys see blur? Okay, cool. My battery's going dead, so clearly I need to keep getting it together. Talk it up, speed it up. Anyway, so you got to be able to communicate your love language. You got to be able to communicate your needs. And this comes from that space of vulnerability, expressing your conditions, right? Like me personally, you guys, I have a past. I have some wounds. They do have triggers for sure, right? But I am so open to discussing and sharing what I'm aware of and what I'm doing to work on it, because then romantic partner, family member, friend on the other side can understand my triggers, right? And can love me through that. And can also understand my needs and my wants, not expectations. Because if I express to you my needs and my wants, I also have to come from the space of no judgment on whether or not you're able to fulfill them right away or not. Because your past and wounds and triggers may not allow you to express to me my needs yet. So unconditional love allows us to grow together because we've already established the communication and the first level of standards of morals, values, and integrity. Speaking truth, being open, being vulnerable. So having no expectations means you're able to communicate your needs, you're able to communicate your wants and why, and then be able to support each other in the growth to become what your needs and wants are, not the expectation, and if not met, then oh shit, this is not it, incompatibility, right? Relationship is a lot about being open and vulnerable. First, being aware within yourself so that you know what to be open and vulnerable about, and then communicating that in a space where you know there's no judgment and there's no expectation. No jealousy. This is where trust comes into play. This is where value in the other person comes into play. If you know you value each other, if you know that you can trust each other, and even in a family member, can you trust your family members? Jealousy typically comes into a space of romantic relationships, but even in friendships, you can get jealous if one of your friends is hanging out with another friend more often, or you weren't invited somewhere, and all of that stuff is actually personal incompletion, personal worth. There's no space for jealousy when it's unconditional love, because you gotta have trust, you gotta have faith, you gotta have a level of understanding between your significant other or family member or friend to know that anything done without you or outside of you does not make you lesser than. Okay, that's just important. No quitting. If you have a level of communication like this, where you are open about, first of all, you're communicating a commitment. You're communicating life commitment. So if that's family, which is lifelong relationship, if that's friendships, where it's like, you're my best friend, like, you're building a business. This is a real thing for me. You're building a business together. You're creating a vision together. You're, partnering in something, or you're just like that ride or die friend. Like, there's no quitting in that. You guys ever have those friendships? Maybe you don't talk to them for a long time, or see them a lot, or whatever the case may be. But when you do reconnect, it's like no love is lost. There's no jealousy in what you've done without me during this time. There's no expectation that you should have included me during that time, right? There's no judgment on how you've carried out your life. And there was no quitting. When we pick up the phone and we reconnect, that friendship has not been quit on. And you have that trust in knowing that person can be trusted with what you share and what you go about in life, and that they're always going to be there when it's called for. And when you are in a intimate relationship and you make life commitments to each other, and you have these vulnerable conversations and these open conversations, and, and you allow quitting to be a part of that, there's no quitting in unconditional love. There is no quitting in unconditional love. Now, could something end and still carry out unconditional love in a friendship form when we talk about romantic relationships? Absolutely. But quitting is like, drop of the dime, I'm out, cut off, there's no connection, there's no appreciation, there's no conversation, there's no acknowledgement, there's no growth, from that, then you quit. You quit on your word. You quit on your commitment to have no judgment and no expectation. You quit the first standards of having morals and values and respect and communication and support and appreciation and like just true conversation. Not all relationships are meant to be, but there is just a level of respect and value that comes from every human that has entered your life. And we get so ugly when we go to quit. And that is because we probably, if we get there, if we get to quit, then there's probably wounds from the past and fears, which I'll get to in a second, and triggers and lack of vulnerability that has been already encompassing the situation, which means there was never unconditional love in the first place. So don't be going around talking about there is no unconditional love if you're the person that put a block up from the beginning. There can't be. You can't receive unconditional love without sharing all your conditions. You're asking for a false action, You're hoping for something you already put a block up against. So, and then there's no fear, Unconditional love cannot coexist with fear. Fear of repeating your past. When you operate in the fear of repeating your past, you are guaranteed to repeat it. If you operate in a way that is fearful of repeating a part of your past, you will repeat your past. What happens is we say, I'm not going to be like my mom. I hear people say this. I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm going to do this, this, and this so that I make sure I'm not like my mom. And because I'm being fearful of being like my mom, I actually keep repeating the same relationships that lead to a broken heart. So you might be fighting to not be a piece of your past, but you are still recreating a piece of your past by doing that. Different pieces, if you guys are getting me. I don't want to repeat my last relationship. So I'm going to make sure that this and this and this and this is in place because these blocks are up, and I'm not going to share this about myself because last time I did, it ended up like this. But you are actually repeating the behavior you learned from your childhood. So we got to be careful with that. And it cannot coexist with unconditional love. It can't. Because when you're fearful, you're not sharing all your conditions. It all goes back to, do you have enough morals and values and integrity with yourself, which creates this foundational person that is going to be trustworthy, that is going to do right by their morals, right? And right by other people and themselves. Are they going to love themselves enough? Are they going to have no judgment on themselves? Are they going to live, a life that's not captive or or shackled by their past? Are they going to be open and aware to themselves to be able to grow, to be a better person, to love themselves more, to love more, to give more, to help more, to not litter, to not do anything that's just dishonest or just out of integrity. And if you get past that standard with self, then you can place yourself in a position to potentially give and receive unconditional love, because you'll be in a confident, whole, complete space with yourself to have strength in your vulnerability to share all your conditions. And the other person on the other side must be of the same level. They have to pass the same standards with themselves to be in a confident and whole place enough to be able to handle your conditions and unconditionally love you through your conditions, which means they have to be strong enough to be vulnerable enough about their conditions to someone that is strong and whole enough to not judge them for their conditions, to not quit on them through the progress and the growth, to not expect it to be at a certain level, but only expect that we grow. And some might say, well, that's an expectation that we grow and that we get better. That comes with the first standards of morals, values, and integrity. If progressing in life and becoming a better person isn't a value of yours, you do not even allow yourself to step into a space of unconditional love. Don't ask for it. So it can only be given and received from a few people in your life, because you must first pass the first level. And they must first pass the first level. And that, to me, is why we don't believe in unconditional love. And that, to me, is why we don't see a lot of unconditional love. Because as we go on in life, because of things like social media and such, we feel like we must be perfect. So many people I talk to think that they're the only ones that struggle with defeating thoughts and doubts and laziness and procrastination. And no, there's so many of us that deal with those things, right? And so it's just really hard in our world today to just get past the personal level of personal standards, personal morals, personal integrity, being okay with going into myself and learning about my past and the pains it's created and how effed up I am because of it, so that I can just, we got to acknowledge those weaknesses and those scars and those wounds and those triggers, because that's the only way we can shut them the fuck up, is by bringing awareness to them. We can't hide. We can't turn a blind eye, because you will constantly get triggered. And when those triggers get ugly, the only love you're going to find for yourself is ugly. I hope that I made some sense. I don't know if you guys have any questions. Feel free to pop up questions. Well, it gets blurry when I do that. Feel free to, share. I really feel like this is a topic that can really bring up a lot of conversation, and let it out, because I'm not going to judge you for your opinion on unconditional love. In fact, I want to create a space for you to speak about what the block is for you to believe that there isn't any, and what experiences you've had to try to prove that point right, and I also believe that this is a message that some people really need to hear, because they're in a really dark, low place, because they don't believe that this type of love exists, and so they're just operating like zombies. I've been there. So let's help free some people. Like this, share this, tag some people, and I'd love your feedback, you guys. I'm going to start sharing from the heart more. So I hope that it touches yours, and I hope you have a beautiful Valentine's Day.